I'm an economic historian, and it was while researching the economic history of mid-Merseyside that I kept coming across references to this enormous ship built in Warrington. Impossible, I said, because the largest ship that could reach Warrington was 30 tons. And even then, it required 2 tides to bring her up into the town. How could a ship of 2,000 tons be launched? As these bits kept appearing, I put them to one side, and eventually I found that indeed a giant ship had been built in the town. Of the many factors prompting working folk to emigrate, perhaps the most powerful was the discovery of gold, first in California and then in 1851 in Australia. The finds were unbelievable. Diggers in New South Wales and Victoria made fortunes in a couple of days, and news of the discoveries spread around the world. Gold fever led to Melbourne's population growing from 23,000 to 70,000 in 1 year. It was a madness. Now, in the summer of 1853, visitors to Warrington were astounded at the sight of an enormous ship under construction on the north bank of the Mersey. They didn't know where she was going to be launched because they couldn't see water, because there wasn't any water. They presumed that she was going to be taken to pieces again and then reassembled on stocks against the sea and launched from there. The largest sailing barges to reach the town, as I say, were 40 tons. However, at exceptional tides, extraordinary spring tides, there could be 18 feet of water at Warrington, and what's more, there was a very useful stretch of the river which ran straight for half a mile, so a ship being launched there could run for half a mile in safety. So Tayleur was to be launched on the flood tide on the 4th of October 1853, and in Warrington on that day there was a carnival atmosphere. The businesses came to a standstill, the shops closed, and thousands made their way to Bangkok to witness the launch. Every vantage point was crowded as the great ship left the slip to float gracefully on the tideway. It happened so quickly that many spectators were caught by the wave from the launch, and they were wet up to their knees, and men hoisted girls on their shoulders, and policemen struggled to keep control. But no one was hurt, and there's a great deal of laughter caused by this incident. Now, although this was a very happy occasion, there was a sad note, for Charles Tayleur did not attend the launch because his wife had died that week. And what's more, Captain John Noel, the Tayleur's captain, who had watched the ship under construction from the beginning, was not in command of the ship for a short journey downriver. Noble was remarkably lucky because he fell into the hold. He fell over 20-odd feet into the hold. All the odds, he got away with it. He was very heavily bruised, and he couldn't stay on board for the journey to Liverpool. In fact, when she reached Liverpool, he still wasn't fit to take over command. He was still shocked and bruised. And one thing I often think about, he wasn't on board when the compasses were fitted. And he had carte blanche from the company to fit the latest compasses, and he didn't do that. I wondered if that had affected him. Now, Warrington's 20 miles from the sea, and the tortuous narrow sailing channel of the Upper Mersey had been carefully marked with miniature buoys. He'd used a little tiny paddle steamer and put these little buoys where the natural deep lay in the river. Timing was all essential to get her over the hazards. The operation would be a close-run thing because the Tayleur was a colossus of 2,000 tons. She was 225 feet long, 40 feet in the beam, and drawing 8 feet 6 inches at launch, so she was empty. She was just like a vessel floating on the top of the tide. A stronger vessel was never built. She had 5 watertight compartments, iron masts, and iron shrouds. To the cheers of thousands, the great ship was taken by 3 tugs, 3 miniature tugs. It was absolutely essential that no time was lost in order that the vessel could be taken over the sandbanks at Sankey whilst the tide was at its height. She was ballasted, she was levelled with 80 tons of coal. At Sankey, the schoolboys from their Friends, the Quaker school, had been brought by their teachers to watch the great ship pass downriver. And they were sat on the lock wall of the Sankey Canal. And one of them, who later became the engineer in charge of, left a description of her. He said, he was sat on the wall, and then suddenly she appeared, rushing straight at them. It was absolutely, people were horrified, and the tugs were obviously struggling to keep control. And the Tayleur cleared the wall by a couple of feet to the immense relief of the spectators. She was going to pile up on the wall and probably kill some of the children. She cleared it by a few feet. Now, near to Runcorn, the river widens, but all small craft using the docks and the canals had been kept at a distance as Tayleur and her tugs manoeuvred towards Runcorn Gap. Now, the people in the beer houses in Runcorn said, they'll never get that boat down. The only way to get Tayleur downriver is to put enormous wheels on it and wheel it down. They said it'd never clear Church Bank. It would never clear the Hurst Rocks. Standing high on the water, it is said that her masts were as high as Runcorn Parish Church. And I know the Runcorn Parish Church steeple is 161 feet tall. At Runcorn Gap, there were more crowds. The sandbank, the Church Bank was cleared, the Hurst Rocks were avoided, and the ship came to anchor in this deep channel. The ship displaced nearly 4 times the largest vessel ever launched from any of the 4 shipyards in Runcorn. She was 4 times. The largest Runcorn ship was 462 tons, and here's something launched 6 miles further upriver, 2,000 tons. And the local newspapers, they were cock-a-hoop. This is marvellous. Wallington's going to boom. It's going to be as big a shipbuilding centre as Glasgow. The preparations took 3.5 months before the Tayleur was ready for sea. In Bramley Moor Dock, the cargo was taken aboard. It was claimed that she could hold 4,000 tons. Thousands of roofing slates, bricks, cast iron cranes, anvils, sheet lead, and tons of zinc acted as ballast to give her stability. The cargo included everything. Boxes of books, a hogshead of chinaware, fireplaces, harnesses, flint glass, ploughs, bundles of leather, bales of cotton, blankets, boxes of caps and hats, Sicilian wine, and 24 boxes of hardware and nails, and crates of window glass. Everything that would be needed in a fast-growing country. The ship was a floating warehouse. She really was. She'd got everything on board. But her main cargo was a consignment of sawn timber in 28-foot lengths. She also took aboard a number of blank slate gravestones. Even the colonial dead needed British exports. And the last thing to be taken on board, finally, was a small 50-ton river steamer, which was secured very firmly on the bow. And the master of this little thing and his wife were to spend the whole of the voyage out to Australia in the cabin of the little steamer. She might have played a part in the wreck, really, because although she was wooden, she had iron fastening bolts. Tayleur left Warrington drawing 8.5 feet of water. Now she had a laden draft of 17 feet forward and 18 feet 3 inches aft. There were 265 English, 111 Irish, 73 Scots and 39 from Europe. That does make that 488. A crew of 71, of whom 55 were to work the ship, the other 17 being stewards and cooks for the passengers. Captain John Noble of Whitehaven was by all accounts a brilliant merchant seaman. He was a new breed of ship's master in that he was a certificated master. He had a ticket. And what's more, he was an exceptional man that he had an extra master's certificate. He was a courteous, polite, cautious, and although only 29 years of age, he was vastly experienced. He'd made a number of runs to Australia. The board of examiners were very impressed with Noble's extensive knowledge of all aspects of seamanship. He was the right man to be captain of Tayleur, unanimous on that. And his first officer, Michael, sometimes Patrick Murphy, was well qualified because he had gained his master's certificate. Of the whole crew, the only one Captain Noble had met before was Hugh Cowan, who was the third officer, and Cowan was excellent. He really was. He was only a youngster, but Noble liked him. And there were 14 foreign nationals, including, it is alleged, 2 Lascars, 3 Chinese, 6 men from Trieste, 2 Greeks and a Dane. There were 55 men, as I said, to work the ship and the ship's clerk, and others who were cooks for the passengers and stewards. Tayleur was also carrying 6 cadets, apprentices, and 2 of them were drowned. But whether they were written in with a compliment, I don't know. Some observers said the crew were inexperienced, that they were lads hardly out of their time, they're too young. And the passengers, the vast majority were young. One report stated they were mostly robust youths, fit for any sort of work. They belonged to the farming, the mining and the artisan classes, with only a small number being rated as clerks. They were unskilled factory hands and quarrymen, dock labourers and so on. Most believed that if they didn't make a fortune in Australia, there would at least be plenty of work for them. The paddle steamer Victory arrived, and the tow rope was passed and the voyage began. People on the shore raised their handkerchiefs and raised their hats, and the emigrants responded with cheers and farewells. As the ship passed down the river, she passed hundreds of seamen climbed the rigging, cheer the great iron clipper on her way, and under bare poles, Tayleur was subject to close inspection. It was a unanimous view that she was the finest vessel ever to leave Liverpool. The crew were lined up on the deck, and a Spectator observed, a newspaper report, as far as the passenger arrangements were concerned, no vessel ever left this port with a fairer prospects than Tayleur, which was proved by the cheering on board. Her boats were all swung out on the davits before she sailed, and there was a clear and ample space along the entire length for the operation of the crew. Tayleur slipped past hundreds of ships and Liverpool's great warehouses. She soon left the Perch Rock Fortress behind, and with the breeze from the southeast, the ship and the tugs left. And as the afternoon light faded away, she was off Anglesey. The pilot was pleased with the way the ship had behaved. He said, "She steers like a fish." He was a bit concerned, though, when he found that the compasses didn't agree with one another. But he made no issue of it. He didn't make any song and dance about it. About 6 p.m, the steamer and her tow were off Linus Point, and it was here that they were to part company. The transfer of the pilot and one or two privileged people who had accompanied their friends, together with one or two of the company's clerks, now took place. Now the parting was a rather noisy business. There was the clatter of machinery, there were orders and commands shouted on both the tug and the ship. And as the tug released the Tayleur, her sails filled, and she was off to a standing start, extraordinary, going at 14 knots before she was out of sight. She just shot off as the sails filled. The tug had difficulty. From a standing start, it said that she'd attained 14 knots. So she quickly disappeared into the darkness. At that point, a man was seen standing on the tug's paddle box. He was in some danger, and he was quickly pulled to safety. He was an Irishman, and he was very confused or very drunk. He said, "Where are you going?" He said, "We're going back to Liverpool." He says, I want to go to Melbourne."